And we're going. And so, Afia, I'd like to welcome you to the Saturday service and hand the keys over to you.
Thanks. Well, thank you. I remember the last time that I got to, hi folks, welcome, good morning, good afternoon. Just a quick logistical thing. I think last time this happened, the recording didn't show me at all because I didn't have Rabbi set up stays on him. So it was whoever had made the last sound was who was on the recording. The only reason I'm saying something is because, thank you. I managed to make visuals again, but I did not write them backwards this time. So apologies, there won't be any like mirrors.
The progress you made, Afia. I'm so proud.
I've been trying to grow. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So welcome, folks. Welcome to the folks who are just coming on. My name's Afia, and I'm filling in for Rabbi this week while he and the family are off traipsing through Europe, though he told me he doesn't like that word, but I do. So. They're out traipsing, having fun. We're here. Welcome. I'm calling in from Lumbee Land and what's now known as the Outer Banks of North Carolina, way out, barely on land at all. We're really borrowing from the ocean on a tiny strip. And I know that we have a new practice of acknowledging the land. And so before we really dive in, just want to start with where we're at and invite a couple of other folks to share where you're calling in from today. I'm also dropping the link to the nifty map that helps, thank you, Alex, also helps you learn the name of the First Nations folks who were stewards of the land that you live on now. Any other names we can speak into the space and locations of where folks are calling in from, or drop in the chat.
Stiligwamish.
Pakamas.
Cherokee and Iroquois.
Yeah. The Cascade Band of the Paiute and can't remember the other one. So, anyway, we're here on this edge of the Cascades.
Beautiful. Thank you, folks. I really enjoy the practices that pull us back to reflect. And so I know that the Land Back movement and this movement to name the First Nations who took care of us for so long lands differently with people, but I find it important because of what it makes me think about when I project in the other direction. So for thousands of years, there were people here, and in thousands of years, hopefully, there will still be people here. I'm a hopeless optimistic on that front. I think we can be doing things for that day. And so that's sort of what's on my mind as I thought about what we would talk about today, is something like legacy, something like continuation. And so thank you all for sharing those names, because those people have done a great deal to help us be here, to be doing whatever we're doing today, Saturday service included, and beyond. So thank you for that. You all know that I got to see Rabbi in North Carolina for the Wild Goose Festival, and that was such a joy. It had been since the last time I saw him in person, I think was when we met in 2017. So it was really special to get to see each other in person again. And I'm in the middle of a kind of life audit where I'm carefully moving through the things that I've been giving my time to be clear about why I'm giving my time to those places, and especially the things that are Googleable, that like, if you can Google my name and find that I was a part of a thing, like, does that thing really line up with what I want to be about? And like, to what degree of seriousness? I'm sharing that with you because among that was the space. Like, am I just coming because I love him? Am I just coming because I want to be like him? Or like, is there actual like value and worth for my growth and the things I need to feel like I need to get done while I'm alive? And the answer was like, yeah, there's a lot here. The reason, and so I imagined in my head, like, why do you Saturday service? Anything like a campaign where everybody gets like 10 seconds to say why they come to Saturday service. The answer for me is that I come to Saturday service because there's a real practical element to what this space offers. I'm able to figure out what kind of person I am and also consider what kind of person I want to be. And it matters for my immediate relationships. It matters for my relationship with myself. And yeah, that feels important. And so why do you Saturday service? It's not going to be on like your next commercial break, but it will be on YouTube.
I Saturday service because I know that if I try to do this life solo, that's not my wisest path. And the reason that's not my wisest is because I know that I can't see myself as objectively as someone else maybe can see myself, both strengths and weaknesses. And so it's good for me to be in a collection of people, particularly this one that's very different, so that I have a reflection, I guess, of where I'm at in a particular week, what are my challenges, and how are people in this community working with those challenges, and then how can I then, incorporate some, all, whatever fits for me to be a better person next Saturday than this Saturday.
So for you, it's motivating a kind of growth and communal connection. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share why they Saturday service? No pressure.
I am here because there are so many different paths, spiritual paths represented here. And I feel like I grow far more from sharing my spiritual journey and hearing others share their spiritual journey from people who are different from me rather than people who are the same or similar. So,
yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Ron. Yeah, I see Rags, I see your hand up.
I think it was one of the reasons why I joined was that I had heard about it already from Alma, who has been part of the group. I don't know whether she's with us today or not, but I haven't seen her. But anyway, coming from an island community right over the other side of the ocean, I felt that it would be good to come into a group where it is religion out of the box, where it doesn't matter what you believe in or don't, you could still be able to be here. I'm with the Episcopal Church in Shetland, but some people perhaps don't go to church at all or don't believe at all, but everybody's been welcome to the group. And the subjects that we look at are so much there for everybody that we might, all of us, appreciate them at some point during our lives.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you, Joy. Yeah, Rags, I think you had it.
Yes, for me, it goes a lot with what Joy was just saying. It's the consistent sense of welcome. I came because I'm a friend of Rabbi Brian. I thought fun to see what he's doing, but it's wonderful to me. I love eclectic community, and so that was a natural draw. But what is of extraordinary value to me is this sense that no matter what I say, I can say what I'm really thinking at the moment. And I know that in this place, I am still welcome. I don't have to self-edit and think, well, is it safe to say this here? And I feel like in so much of life, that would endanger my career here. That would endanger this, that, all those danger flags. And I don't find the danger flags here. I find that sense of welcome. And just as with a plant growing, it needs space, it needs light, all of this for me to grow as a person, the openness here, the light that shines has been really positive consistently since the beginning.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate, thank you all for sharing those things. And I'm also grateful for the things that are unspoken, but that you all embody and live out as we continue to gather. I'm hearing like a value of welcome, a value of grace, abundant grace, a value of challenge. That's beautiful stuff. Yeah, Aaron, thank you. Yeah, Aaron in the chat said came here to get out of my own boxes. Right. So like, yeah, back to that progress and shifting. So thank you all for that. I wanted to sort of create kind of an anchor. I'm gonna now a warning. We quote movies a lot in my family. That's from Death Becomes Her, which is a really dark comedy from the 90s. She takes this potion that's going to save her life, and after she swallows it, the lady who gave it to her says, "Now a warning." And Meryl Streep goes, "Now a warning?" Like, so I say to you with that surprise, now a warning that I don't have this all the way worked out. I pulled from my nerd bucket. I pulled from my like spiritual heart space bucket. And so I'm hoping that this moves in the direction
in under the wire.
That both make sense for all of us, and also for like the intention that I was hoping to like unfold. So I want to bring us back to a quote that I shared some time ago when I stood in for Rabbi. Not backwards written, so you should be able to read it. What? Yeah, it's impressive to just write. Who knew, right? What you pay attention to determines what you see, and what you pay attention to determines what you miss. This came back to my mind while Rabbi and I were at Wild Goose. You all probably read the newsletter about the diner moment. I would love to turn it into like a comedy scene at some point, but that's what I think we should do with race is compost it into something else so we can start to metabolize it and really transform it. But what happened from that moment is the next day, Rabbi had a small table talk conversation where they just gave him access to a round table with like 12 seats around it. And whoever came, we had like a kind of small conversation about things. And so at that conversation, the pastor who Rabbi mentioned in the newsletter was one of the folks around the table. And so Rabbi's like, "Hey, that thing yesterday," and it started, so now it was present in that space as well. And that was beautiful. Rabbi finished, he did his thing, people were moved, they laughed, nothing was thrown, it was great. And then we all debriefed, and the conversation went back to this pervasiveness of racism, and oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. And I noticed in the conversation that, so I want to be careful here. I'm not trying to get us to pay attention to a conversation about race. I'm trying to get us to pay attention to a conversation about process. So this happens to be about race. I mean, eventually I would love to do that too, but right now that's not what I'm trying to do. So these folks are lamenting, "I can't believe this is still happening. How old was the guy?" I say, "Oh, he was about my age. He was no older than 35. I can't believe that's still a thing, blah, blah, blah. I'll never see the day when this is gone." And it flipped me back to a quote. I'm quoting my friends because my friends are dope like that. One of my friends is Buddhist. Her name is Grace O'Keefe, and she introduced me to Buddhism and the Dharma when we were in seminary. And she was explaining to me why she's so committed to her. I've met few people who are as devoted as she is to her commitments. And she said, "I'm doing this because I'm compelled by the question about what does it mean for an entire generation to be devoted to the Dharma." And I think about that question in this context of racism, in the context of any sense of what are the conditions that we're in that we don't wish for anyone else. What does it mean to be a part of a we that is so committed to a future, a day that we'll never see, that we stay in our practices, we stay in our values, despite the grief, despite the agony, of having to suffer in that present condition. Am I making any kind of sense?
Can you say it again a little
A little
slow?
bit of sense,
Yeah.
for sure. So I'm saying, what happens if we belong to a generation that is committed to goodness? We'll make it vague. So essentially, the you that you're trying to become every Saturday, in part, is to create a world that's better than the one you have now, right? So when you hear a story like the one Rabbi told about the thing in North Carolina, it's very easy, and I do it. I have this body. I'm in North Carolina. I do it often. Like, I'm never gonna see a day where this particular knife is not pointed at us. I still maintain that this is at all of us. We are all suffering under this thing, right? But it's not a conversation about racism. I'm gonna focus on the right thing. The thing I want to focus on is that just because I won't see it does not mean I should not commit my today to it.
Oh,
Like
that was
planting tree.
great. Say that again. Say that one again. Just
Because I will never see it, it does not mean that I should not commit my today to it. I'll give you another concrete example.
It's like planting a tree. If you
Say that
plant a
again?
tree,
Yeah.
you might not get the fruits from it. Other people will.
Precisely. And Aaron,
Right.
I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna show you a piece of art that captures that exact thing.
Okay.
This is a piece of art called Foresight by Naima Pennyman, sorry. They're sisters who run a Black and Indigenous run farm in the South. And it says, we carry on the legacy of our ancestral grandmothers who braided seeds in their hair before boarding transatlantic slave ships, believing against odds in a future of sovereignty on land. And now we all more or less know the story and the bleakness of the transatlantic slave trade. I don't think that I would have had the wherewithal to think about seeds for a harvest on an unknown land, given the conditions of that suffering. And yet this is only one example of that kind of investment in a future day, right? That I will braid the seeds into the hair of my granddaughters and trust that my great granddaughters will have access to this nourishment. And so, just like you said, Aaron, that's the thing. And so I'm gonna take a breath and let it marinate. What's in the air right now for folks?
The life force in the seed, the potential.
I feel like it brings up something that I feel is often misappropriated, but could be appropriate nonetheless. The whole thing that all of us, appropriately or not, love to quote from various First Nations peoples about the seventh generation. And I always try and hold that in my heart, how I need to look at the effects of what I'm doing, not for me or even for my children and grandchildren, but out to the seventh generation.
And yeah, Max, thank you for that. The conversation about appropriation is so, yeah, it's such an important question to ask. And so this is the nerd part of what I was thinking about we would do, which is talk about language and syntax, which does not sound exciting. I know. Well, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you why, and then get back to appropriation. So I took Greek my first semester in seminary, and I entered seminary begrudging. I wasn't going to figure out how to be a minister. I was going to figure out how to unknot myself from my own particular Christian experience and really figure out what I believed. And so I took Greek my first semester, and realized like, whoa, the Bible that I was taught is not the Bible that was written. But that was my first moment of realization. And it happened with this phrase that I'm sure if you have any relationship with quote unquote New Testament scripture, you've heard or seen the phrase, "it is finished," which is what Jesus said on the cross, the last dying breath. In Black church, there's like a whole Easter celebration. That's saying gets its own sermon in a lot of traditions. I think that there's a really strong connection between the theology of those few words, "it is finished," and this end of days thing, right? Like Jesus completed a thing. No one else needs to touch it. It's all the way done. However, a warning. That's not really what the Greek is telling us. So English does time differently than other languages. And if any of you here speak another language, you probably have lots of examples of the way that a word can just do a little bit something different between English and that other language. In Greek, there's a sense of time, which we kind of have in English, but it's not as suave. In Greek, you can say that a thing finished a year ago, and it's still finishing now. And you do that with like the way that we say ed, like I walked. It's that simply communicated. And so in Greek, the "it is finished" line was Jesus saying, I'm finishing it right now, and it's going to continue to finish until. So even today, right now, that work on the cross is still finishing. It's not done. There's no period there. There's no ed at the end of that word. All the translations, the politics, all of the things that go into making ancient scripture into English understandable for us into the 21st century make it a different thing. So what I've been thinking about is going back to appropriation. Now I'm looking for other languages that do similar things, right? And in a way, this is one of the challenges that I sit with when to borrow, how to borrow appropriately, because there's legitimate lessons to be learned because English does not have these certain constructs available to us, right? So how do you get out of your box, right? We're all here to do that. And so I'm encouraging like just to be in those questions, because there are other places to look for the medicines that we need to change our minds and grow.
I presume I go to the end and turn left at the sign.
So one of those concepts that I'm borrowing, and I'm going to drop in the chat a link to an article. If you are any kind of nerd like me or feel very passionate about not appropriating, you can read this article. It's about the wider context of the philosophy of this word from South Africa. And you may have even heard really popular in like interfaith spaces. It's Ubuntu. Has anyone ever heard of this term before?
No.
We use it a lot in the Episcopal Church because Archbishop taught it to us.
Yeah, so if you've heard this term before, can you say a little bit more about what you know about it? How was it presented to you? I guess I should do it like this so it doesn't say the whole thing. I saw a couple of hands go up that you've heard of Ubuntu before.
I've already talked to. I can talk about it if nobody else wants to. Archbishop Tutu introduced it to us as the Anglican Communion as a way in a state much like right this summer, for those of you who know, where there was all this conflict and just saying, wait a minute, we have this concept that I exist because the community exists, that my being and your being are interdependent, and that's how
Thich Nhat refers to his inner being, I think.
Say that again,
Thich
Aaron.
Nhat, the Buddhist teacher, died
yeah, inner being,
couple
yes.
months ago. Inner being.
Yeah,
In English.
Thank you. And Ron, I think I saw your hand pop up as well.
Yeah, there's a version of Linux called Ubuntu that was created in South Africa, and it exists because we all exist, because it's open source and
Source, yeah.
represents the contributions of the entire community.
Thank you. Yeah, so oftentimes when you see it in the more like less respectful, like legitimately appropriated places, it's translated this way: I am because of who we all are. And so what I've been wondering for myself, thanks to the catalyzing moment in middle of nowhere, Podunk, North Carolina, is who's a part of my we. So when you say we, who do you think of? Like, who's the we that you depend on when you say, I'm doing this so that we can have a better future, or I'm saying I'm doing this so we can have a better reality? Like, who really is included in this?
So interesting, not the people that birthed me. And that's important, and I think we'll get to it in donuts too, but that's important that my we is not the people that birthed me, because like you're talking about legacy and generations before, and the stuff that I inherited from generations before was toxic, unhealthy, not the way I see value and worth to living. And so my we had to become other than blood relative for me.
Ancestors.
Yes, and I didn't know that I knew that, but somehow the inside of me knew to do that, even though the family of origin system did not allow me to do it for a very long time. But there was like this inner, I mean, that's, I guess, to go back to the why am I here? That's why I'm here in a group like this at 63 years old, is because my body has somehow been looking for a different we that would make me a better me for a very long time. Does that make sense? Okay.
It does.
I mean, I approach this as a sense that we're all interdependent, and that even non-species, we're all from this planet, and Mother Earth and the ancestors, deep time ancestors, talking about we're all one species and we're all interdependent. But beyond that, all life and all not life, whatever that would mean, are interdependent. And whether we want to say we can do something and kill something, and just, it doesn't matter. It always matters because it affects us whether we want to or not. And this is to me a sense of ethics that Spinoza talks about. I don't know if that's what he meant, but I think it's a similar idea. And the Buddhist idea, I got this from Buddhism, the ecological principle of interdependence, that we're all one. Beyond whether you believe or don't believe in God.
Right.
That's a principle, whether it's faith or not, for me.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah. And so one of the things that you're reminding me of is that, oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead, please.
I think that one of the traps that we fall into is the meaning of different words. And that I think that that what those words mean actually are different to each one of us because of our background, because of what we've grown up with. And I use one example that I have fun with when I go to the gas station and I am told to swipe my card. I say, I don't have to. I said, because in my generation, swipe means steal. And so I don't have to steal my card because I already have it.
Yeah.
So, and so oftentimes I think that, especially when we go back into things that were written a long time ago, that what we are accustomed to in our world is that when people speak, they can be recorded. When people are saying something, it can be documented, it can be written down. But those types of technologies did not exist. So that I think that when we try to say, what did this person mean from a long time ago, it may not be that that person even said something like that, especially in English, because English didn't exist then. And so I think that what we need to focus on is the present and what we can do in the present to be more sensitive to each other, to be more accepting of each other, because we all come from different places. And that's what makes it great, because we can learn from each other and we can experience things in a different way. The more that we get tied up into trying to say that everybody needs to see this word or this meaning as this, what I believe, that then we run into problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you,
In
Bob.
Shetland, we have got several islands. I think there's about 15 that are inhabited, but we stretch over a 70-mile length. The width is only about 3 or 4 miles at places, and 1 or 2 places it's much narrower than that. But I learned something when I first came up here, and that was 1986. I was living down in the south end of the islands near the airport, and somebody who lived opposite invited us across, myself and the husband that I had at the time, across for a cup of tea. So we went, and was telling us quite a bit about Shetland and the dialects. And he had been brought up further north and west in Shetland, and at a time when the only way of traveling was either on your feet or on a Shetland pony. And he married out of his area into the South Mainland where we were. And he couldn't understand them. They were both speaking supposedly Shetland, but the dialects were totally different. The words meant different things. There were about 3 names for a pig. And I mean, they might have a pig on their croft, but in one, I had a cat called Herky, and then I was told, but Herky is Shetland for pig. Well, and it was my shortened version of Hercule Poirot because of what the cat looked like. And I, short word Herky. Oh, you can't call your cat Herky. That means it's a pig. And somewhere else it would mean something completely different. And a friend's son now is studying language in Aberdeen University. His thing supposed to be studying English, but he has found there are 9 dialects in this 70-mile length of Shetland.
And yeah, thank you, Joy. And that's
people can't understand each other.
But it gets to Bob's point of like being action-based, which I think is also sort of what I was leaning towards with the focus, that not to get ourselves wrapped up into the language exactly, but in how the language is impacting our perception of the world. And in that way helps determine what we do and don't do, what we see and don't see. Kip, you had your hand up.
Yeah, coming back to your question about this, the we, how big can anyone's we be in any given minute? I think it's something that has to be very dynamic. And I think I need to be aware of when it's dynamic. Like Joe, my family of origin, my heritage was not very supportive of who I want to be or how I want to feel. So at a certain point, I had to not be a we in my family. I had to condense my group of identity much, much smaller. And I think we do choose the we that helps us grow to be who we want to be, like in this group. But to your larger point, I think, is the we needs to be everyone eventually. And I think keeping that dichotomy and that conflict in mind is the hard part. And usually when it's a hard part, it's spiritual truth to me. It's something that not so easy.
And Kip, thank you for saying that. It also makes me feel like that when things are really difficult, I tend to not want to focus on them. Right? So if what I pay attention to determines what I observe and don't observe, and I'm observing that that's really difficult, I'm suddenly not going to include the gentleman who tromped over to us in the diner when I say I want all of us to feel love and peace. Because if he felt love and peace, that wouldn't have happened, right? But yeah, what you're saying, yeah, thank you for that.
In my practice, I take it as a challenge. Now, I was raised by Marines, so this is part of my gung-ho, But if it irritates me, my practice is to lean into it. If it scares me, if it pisses me off, then it's like, oh, there's something in me that's catching there, and it becomes my practice. Sometimes to my detriment, going that everything's hard, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Steve, I saw that you've raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the answer to two questions. One is, why do I show up? And the other has to do with this terrible echo, I'm sorry. One is, why do I show up? And the other is something very unique about this group. Bob talked about the idea that language gets us into a lot of trouble. And if we think back over the last months, let alone over the couple of years we've been online, this is an interesting group because we do step on language landmines, and this group is strong enough or brave enough or concerned enough to point them out. And then when we become aware of them, we want to work through it in a way that holds us together, which is a remarkable level of caring that in most places, when we find ourselves walking into linguistic landmines, we exit the community. Right. And we say, this isn't the place for me to be, but there's something about this that transcends that, or we have developed an atmosphere that incorporates that. And when we step on the landmines, we want to work it out, whether it's pointed out in the moment or in follow-up emails to last week that gives us next week's agenda. We really care about how we're heard. And I think that's very unique.
And also, I want to name what I'm hearing and experiencing, that's also an embodiment of a spiritual value. Because as much as you could choose to leave a community because of misunderstanding, the community can choose to kick you out, right? Like, people get excommunicated and ostracized, especially from spiritual religious communities all the time. And in addition to that value, there's also the value of staying in the frying pan, so to speak. So like, stuff is not easy, but what I observed is a miscommunication, but I'm not going to lose focus on the potential for us to find resolution for the sake of something greater. So just to reflect back to all of us that's alive and active for each of us who participates in this space in that way. I want to take a quick pause. We have a couple of announcements. I tend to forget the announcements. So I'm going to do that before we get too close to time. They're really simple and short. There's, and I hope I'm doing this right. So if it makes better sense to somebody other than me, please fill in the gaps. Dropping the link in the chat to the clubhouse with 3 notes: that the God/Shekinah room is being refurbished, that the 12-step room is open, and the third one just says spotlight on Aaron. I'm assuming, Aaron, you know what that means. Spotlight in the clubhouse? Okay, cool. I see you nod. Great. So hop in the clubhouse, comment, stay, contribute. Thank you, Alex, for dropping that as well. So I think the last thing I want to say, is that what most compelled me, and I didn't catch it really until I watched Rabbi. I was in the car, obviously talking to the camera when he did the little dashboard cam. I don't know if you all saw that, but he was like, we need to record our processing of that moment and see if it can be useful in some way. So I was there, but when I watched it back, it really hit me how disturbed I was, not by the guy doing the thing, but by the guy doing that thing in front of another kid who was obviously not white, who obviously was not a part of his league. I still think a lot about that kid and other kids like him. Not to focus on the race part, but to focus on what am I doing or not doing? How is my focus dictating my opportunities to make something better for that kid? And so the whole point of this for me was to just bring those questions to this space and to have us, I'm really curious about that, about how we are invested or not, because if I'm focused on me all the time, if every Saturday it's just, what do I do? What do I not do? How do I get better? How do I love myself? If it's all me, how do I ever, what chance do I allow myself to think about a we, and a we that's beyond my lifetime, right? Like I don't know how much I am or am not giving myself that chance if my focus is always on me. And so this was sort of my way of trying to open up some exploration around that, so that the we is not just like all of us alive right now, but like all of us who will be alive in 50, 60, 70 years, because you belong to that we too. And what occurred to me, man, this is annoying. The sound of this is annoying to me because it sounds like a rhyme and it's annoying. What occurred to me is that I don't consider myself as a part of that collective, as like an intergenerational collective enough. And so my political decisions, my organizational alignments, where I commit myself and my space could be more tightly refined with that sort of like braiding seeds in the hair kind of thing. There's a seed I'd like to give to a future person, but I would like for myself to consider that future person more often than in moments like that threat in the diner. And I wonder what's possible.
What I've been doing while you've been speaking, I was trying to get it back onto charge while I'm talking.
I wonder what's possible if that happens for all of us. Language be damned, the limitations of English, of time, whatever. If we can be in an action-oriented space that is devoted to more than just our lifetimes and our bloodlines.
One of the things that I've done in my life is I had the phrase, or say to myself, I consider the source.
Consider the source. I'm sorry, Bob. Can you say more?
Yeah, in other words, if someone says something that I might disagree with and that I hold a different thing, I just say, my self-talk is consider the source. In other words, I don't have to let things bother me that if somebody else is saying something that I might disagree with that, and I might know that if I want to try to change something there, that I'm probably not going to be successful. So within myself, I just say, consider the source and let it go.
So you shift your focus so that you don't become wrapped up in the,
Right. And each of us have our own unique life experience. No one, I believe that no one, that there, because of all the millions of people that exist on Earth, I don't think anybody has the same exact life experience as you or I. So because everything happens as they happen in our lives, second by second.
There's a comment in the chat that says kind of what you're talking about, Afia, could be as simple as what you wear on your t-shirt. In terms of how to, so here, I'll read it. Sending a message is part of it. Something as banal as a message on a t-shirt.
In terms of like, sorry, I feel like we have a couple threads that we're weaving together. That is to investing in a future time, being a part of a week.
Like let's use your example in the restaurant, that little boy. If I had gone into the restaurant as me with you and Rabbi, and that little boy was in there, and I had a shirt on that said Black Lives Matter, and I went and sat by that little boy and just said, hey, hi, I hope you're having a good day. Are you eating a donut? What are you having for breakfast? That looks like a non-contributive, very tiny, very not big or important move.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like, who's watching that? Maybe that little boy will remember, oh, there was this nice lady that had this shirt on and she validated me in a restaurant. So
Yeah,
But
or
that-
even as simple as there's more than one idea out there about my value.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Michael, yeah, I see your hand is up. Thank you, Joe, and the whoever commented that. Candace, thank you.
Mm.
The I versus we question is, I think that's central to, I was going to say our spiritual journey, but I won't be that, I'll say mine, but I think it is ours. It's true. I mean, there's billions of people on the earth, and every person is individual and acts individually, connected more or less to but it's so complex, right? It's impossible to, and then there's the everyday practicality of things. If you feel threatened, you're not going to love somebody who's going to attack you, right? You're going to defend yourself or avoid it, like, oh well, consider the source, right? So then you don't even have to deal with it. But I think part of the spiritual journey is forgetting, letting go of the us, and finding that I mean, God made us, everybody, right? He made everything, even the bad people.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. How do we get in touch with that? I mean, to me, that's part of the journey, and you can't stay there all the time. I mean, well, I suppose you could. I mean, that's enlightenment, right? That's the Buddha
Yeah.
under the tree.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
hope that's real while we're in this form, right? Like, who knows if, I don't know. Yeah, that's a different conversation
Yeah.
of like, is this
Yeah.
process prep for another process that gets us there? I don't know.
Yeah,
We can.
but it's that quest for the we, that quest for the whatever it is that unites us all, and maybe we just use the word God, right? Whatever. It's hard.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's beautiful. Thank you. Marcus, I thought I don't like cold calling, but I thought I saw a hand up, and was that
I
a
did raise
purpose?
my hand. No, I raised my hand and then I get nervous and then I put my hand down.
Okay.
But
I hope that didn't
guess
contribute to nervousness.
no,
but
it's okay. No, I
okay.
was just gonna say in my life, we're talking about this we and these I's and what we put out in the world and stuff. And in my life, I try to make my we or my I smaller than the people I'm interacting with, because my we shouldn't be up here. My values, I think in society we put so much value on what individuals think, and it's my way and it needs to be this way and I'm right. And so we, especially people who hold power, make themselves really, really big, right? And they become so big over that little me that you're talking to, you're interacting with. And so for me, I try to make my we really small and that other person's little me bigger, especially working with people in poverty and people who are in systemic racism and the systems, right? And I also carry that into my relationships outside of work, and try to give the power to people who haven't had power, I mean, I work customer service for the state, but even then the power dynamics for some people, it's like I'm here and they're here. And so every interaction that I have, I try to put them here and me here, and it's hard to do, but those impacts will carry on. And it might, and it's hard to see like how impactful it will be generations to come, because we're very in the now. But I think about things like that. I'm like, my impact, the mom that came in and her baby is screaming and crying because she's hungry and needs, and And the person at the front desk that before she got to me was irritated. And then I'm like, it's, and I try to make her feel like it's okay that the baby's crying. What can I do to help you? Would your kids like some color? I mean, I have crayons in my drawer. I'm like, because I don't act like it's a big deal. The kids have been sitting there for an hour in the DHS office. Here's some crayons, here's some little toys. Why don't, it's fine. How about we get them settled and then you and I can talk business, because it's like, they're kids. It doesn't matter. But in those 30 seconds when they walked in the door, they were told, well, your kids need to be quiet. Does any what I'm saying make sense?
No, absolutely. It does. And I think I'm also hearing you, whether you're mean to or not, reference some really specific exercises that rabbis walked us through of like, it's not about you and it's all about you, right? Like that paradox of if you don't shift in your own perspective between your importance and the importance of the person you're interacting with, right? Like you can dictate, you can make or break a day, and who knows what the impact of that is. And so there is there's a practical thing in what you're saying as well that makes it all part of this constellation. And really that was what I was thinking is like, okay, it's almost like a fractal thing. Like there's me and there's all these circles of life that spiral out, right? And so if I commit myself along with, how many are we today? 30 people. If all 30 of us in the little starting points commit to, it's not about me and it's all about me. Every ring of every life that circles out starts to create a different vibe. That starts to create a different feel, right? So the language we use, how long we're alive, all of those things matter in different ways because we have a shared commitment to whatever that thing is. Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, I've been struggling with Bob's comment earlier about consider the source. Consider the source seems to me to be dismissive and exclusionary. And
who's the source?
Because when trying to understand the source and where they're coming from and why they're saying it, involves me with them, but consider the source just kind of says, oh, I don't need to bother with them and I can just exclude them and put them out. And that's been bugging me since I first heard it. And I just decided I need to.
But who's the source?
Whoever made
source?
that,
I'm not
that
gonna
comment
say
that's making me uncomfortable.
Well, and I see two more hands and I'm noticing the time. So just in transparency, trying to balance a couple of dynamics. I also think that might be what was named earlier, which is like, this is a space where different understandings can take place and what comes from those different understandings can yield other conversations. So don't want to squash that and also want to honor the two folks who haven't had a chance to speak just yet. So I'm going to ask that we let that float right here, not disappear, just hang right there for a second while we hear. I don't know. I didn't see who popped up first between Ellis and Ann.
We'll let Ellis speak. Yeah.
Okay. Ellis, yeah.
Well, hi, this is all really, really interesting, and I'll just make it really short. It's really easy in a group like this to become all excited about a particular thing somebody says, and your mind goes way off there, and then somebody says something different, and your mind goes off there.
Maddie.
Yeah. The thing of it is what is our ongoing daily, hour by hour, minute by minute concept of what we're talking about today? Is it always there? In other words, it's like what you read is what you think, or what you think is who you are. So if we think continuously that about these things and what I can do, it might be little tiny things throughout the day or the week, as opposed to, oh, get all excited because a new news item came up and I'm getting all excited about that, as opposed to who are we minute by minute.
Yeah, thank you, Ellis. Yeah. And I, again, it's here. It didn't disappear. It's right here. And I'm not going to decide what happens with it. I'm just naming that it's not gone away. Okay.
What is it?
Again?
Right.
I didn't hear.
Never mind.
Yeah, I lost it. Anne, did you want to say a thing? It was one of these.
Yeah, this is kind of related to what Steve was saying. And part of my job in the tech field is to encourage clients to make their websites accessible for people with disabilities. And usually the argument is first of all, they don't even think about it. And it's too expensive, it's too hard, da 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 da. So the goal for me is to get them to think empathetically, to see what it's like, to see the barriers that they're putting up for other people, and to realize that they themselves are only temporarily able. So when they get older, they're going to have these challenges. So it all comes down to empathy. And once you encourage all of your staff to think that way, you end up with a really empathetic culture, and you end up with a great corporate culture. So that's sort of the take on it, is getting people to not see people as other and not dismissing them because they're different.
Yeah, thank you.
I know.
And you also brought up a great point, which is if what I pay attention to, which is me right now, determines what I see and what I miss, I'm going to miss the fact that I'm not going to be this me always. Right. So you see how it coils into smaller and larger spirals. You are not going to be like this all the time, right? Like, and Rabbi's brought us to that thought in different ways too. Everyone likes transformation. Not everyone likes having been transformed. If the you of 10 years ago doesn't think the you today is a heretic, you're doing something right. Like there's all of these things embedded in us. So don't focus too much on the you now, and ebb and flow, like we were encouraged by an earlier comment. Kip, yeah.
Afia, we're paying attention to this, which is really great, but we're about to miss the prayer requests the community has made for us.
Prayer request. I had it on my paper too. I missed it. Yes, please. Thank you. I even wanted to do that at the top. Thank you, Kip. Yes, please. Let's be we. Let's be we. Yeah.
Yes. So we are going to be a we to send love to Amy, myself, Linda D, Phil, friends and family of Justin, Elizabeth, Josh, Josie, Rita S, Rita W, Peggy B, Marilyn G, Greta V, Vashti, the Swedish elections, Abbas, and April.
Thank you. It's gonna give us our 1 minute to hold space for these we's, us we. Thank you all for being of one mind about the folks who are important to us here. We're a minute from the break for donuts and deep dive and poetry room. And Ron, I think you wanted to say a thing about poetry space.
I'd just like to invite people in. We're going to discuss our community and our relations to our community in the context of 4 poems: the world's shortest poem by Muhammad Ali, 2 poems by Amanda Gorman from her book Call Us What We Carry, and a poem by Tiva Harrison, which is one of the most powerful poems I think I've read. So.
Thank you, Ron.
And this is on community.
On community. Beautiful. Thank you. And reminder, I've been hearing Rabbi say lately, the rooms you go to can change and flex. So go with your gut, what feels good. Thank you all so much for trusting me to throw things out on the wall today and see what sticks. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your weekend, and see y'all next week.
Thank you,
So glad
Afia.
you were here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Afia.
Thank you, Afia.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Can somebody put me in deep dive, please?
And with that, I'm going to end the recording and I will open up the room.